He is coming. Cover your butt.
What's the shape of the moon? If you're someone that makes observations, and you look at either pictures of the moon or the moon itself through a telescope, you will likely arrive at the conclusion that it's round. If you're a flat earther, and you have a compulsion to contradict every known scientific fact, then you'll say it's flat. Well, today's flat earther believes just that, and oh boy, do you need to have some crazy ideas in order to think that the moon is flat. Let's find out what you have to abandon in order to say that the moon is flat.
The moon is flat, not spherical. This is a subject I've had trouble with, and have gone around in many circles. I know many others have issue with this too. First off, through a telescope, it appears to be a sphere to the human eye and mind, but this doesn't mean it actually is. First off, we've been told all our lives it is a sphere, so our subconscious will project sphereness onto it.
I've already spoken at length about how we know that the moon isn't flat, so I won't bore you with the details in this video. If you want to know more, there are videos in the description that you can watch. But let's do a quick recap so that we're all on the same page. In the middle part of the moon, craters appear as circles, while at the edges of the moon, these same craters are now ovals. At the center of the moon, where the sun is shining directly on the craters, there is no visible shadow, similar to noon on Earth when the sun is directly above. There are more shadows near the edges of the moon, where the sun is hitting the craters at an angle. It's not just at the center of the moon that this happens. This happens wherever the sun is hitting directly over the moon. For example, during a half moon here, you can see that the area where the sun is hitting directly, there are very little shadows. But the areas towards the center of the moon now, where the sun is not hitting directly above the craters now have a shadow. Keep these shadows in mind as we go forward because they'll be important later on.
We saw before how sunlight and moonlight clearly have different properties, and furthermore the moon itself cannot physically be both a spherical body and reflect the sun's light. Reflectors must be flat or concave for light rays to have any angle of incidence. If a reflector's surface is convex, then every ray of light points in a direct line with the radius perpendicular to the surface, resulting in no reflection.
There's no reflection, but let's talk about how human sight works. Light, either from the sun or an artificial source, travels and hits an object. This object reflects and absorbs some of the light. The light that is reflected to us is what we see. So if you have an object that mostly absorbs all the light except for red, we see a red object. But it is the light that is reflected off of objects that allows us to see an object. In your haste to try to prove that the moon is flat, you have actually managed to say something stupider than the Earth being flat. You have just said that spheres cannot reflect light. That means that every ball out there is invisible. They cannot reflect light. So every baseball, football, basketball, golf ball, all of these are invisible. We should be seeing this instead of this, because according to you, spheres cannot reflect light.
Again, if the moon is a sphere, which it is declared to be, how can its surface reflect the light of the sun? If her surface was a mass of polished silver, it could not reflect from more than a mirror point.
What do you mean it could only reflect from a mere point? Do you know that there are convex mirrors in the world? Here's a convex mirror off of my motorcycle. Here are listings on Amazon on buying convex mirrors. Here's a giant convex jelly bean in the middle of Chicago. I don't know where you get this idea that spherical surfaces can only reflect light from one point. This statement was made with absolutely no research behind it.
Let a silvered glass ball or globe of considerable size be held before a lamp or fire of any magnitude, and it will be seen that instead of the whole surface reflecting light, there will be a very small portion only illuminated. But the moon's whole surface is brilliantly illuminated. A condition or effect utterly impossible if it be spherical.
Wait. You just said that a sphere has no reflection. Now you're telling me that spheres do have a reflection? You need to make up your mind. These two claims are mutually exclusive. You can't say that a sphere has a reflection and has no reflection at the same time. Fine, let's talk about how spheres reflect light. In the example you have here, you have clearly chosen to light the sphere with a small and local light source. This kind of light source is nothing like the sun. The sun is a large and distant object, many times larger than the Earth. Your example deliberately misrepresents the way that we understand the moon to be lit. When you have a small and local light, only small sections of the sphere receive light at a 90-degree angle, resulting in a hotspot. The rest of the sphere receives light at an angle, resulting in light being less intense and creating a gradient where light becomes less intense the further it gets from the center of the sphere. This is not what the heliocentric model says. The heliocentric model states the sun is far away and much larger than the moon, resulting in the sunlight hitting the moon at a 90-degree angle across the whole surface of the moon. The funny part is that you can recreate this phenomenon the same way that you created an example of a sphere being lit by a local small light. This is Blender, a 3D modeling program. Here I have created a sphere that is being lit by a small local light source. As you can see, where the light hits the sphere at a 90-degree angle, right here, that area is very bright. And the areas past that, the areas where the light is hitting at an angle, we start seeing that gradient that I spoke about earlier, until we get to the edge where the light can no longer make it past the curve and it's now dark. This is what happens when you have a small local light source. What if we were to change this light from acting like a small local light source and instead acted like the sun? We would get this. As you can see, we no longer have this bright area where the light was hitting at a 90-degree angle, because now the entire surface has the light hitting at a 90-degree angle. We now only have the dark spot of the sphere, which is where the sunlight can no longer reach it, and we have this very small area here where it's transitioning. This is what you think that the heliocentric model is saying, when in fact it is saying that the light is more like this. This new model more accurately represents what the heliocentric model is saying, and because it more accurately represents what the heliocentric model is saying, it also matches our observations. You have deliberately cherry-picked a model of a lit sphere that showed what you wanted, while ignoring models that show what is actually stated by the heliocentric model. If you're going to try to debunk the heliocentric model, at least bother to represent it correctly.
We also have from the Greek legends, the chariot wheel symbolizing the sun and moon, and in ancient Egypt, a boat is transporting the sun disk. The ancients always referred to the sun and moon as disks, they never said they were spheres.
Yes, and these ancients also said that the sun was carried by a boat. So if these ancients have accurately recorded observation, then where the fuck is the boat? Once again, you are cherry-picking what you think helps you out, while ignoring what doesn't suit your conclusion. If you are going to say that ancient myths are accurate representations of reality, you better be willing to accept that the sun is carried across the sky on a chariot.
So it's flat, but this raises two problems.
Actually, it raises a lot of questions. Earlier in your video, you said this.
The moon is self-luminous and not reflecting the sun.
If the moon is self-luminous, Then what the hell are these? Remember earlier how we talked about the shadows that craters cast? Well, if the moon is self-luminous, then these shadows can't be shadows. What are they? We will call these moon spots for now. These moon spots are now a curious phenomenon. We don't really know what causes them. Before, it was easy. Sun hitting one side of the crater cast a shadow on the opposite side. But now, they're just blemishes. Blemishes that magically line up with the position of the sun. Moon spots aren't static either. They move around depending on the time of the month. Like before, they magically match observations of being shadows always appearing on the side of the crater opposite the sun. But let's see what problems you think a flat moon would present.
Problem 1. Flat, but how? When the moon is retreating from me in Europe, setting in common terms, those on the east coast of America would soon see it approaching, but they would see the same face. The moon isn't a disk that flips 180 degrees when nobody's looking, so how do we all see the same face?
That's actually a legit question. It's also a good question if the moon is round and nearby. No flat earther has managed to answer this question, so I'm looking forward to your answer.
The model has to be as such. The moon is flat and facing down. This is the only way we can all see the same and only face.
That doesn't solve the problem at all. You still have the same problem.
But this raises problem 2, and it's a big problem. Problem 2. The ellipse issue. If the moon is flat and facing down, some would say, we should not see it sink behind the horizon. But we should, due to our perspective vision and our eye's vanishing point.
Fucking perspective. Nope, this is nonsense. So, skip.
But the problem we find is that the moon does not slowly appear to our eyes as an ellipse during its departure, increase in distance from the eye, like all other flat face-down circles appear to. It appears to us as a circle, as though it is vertical in relation to our eyes. Surely within the flat face-down model, it should turn into an ellipse.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So what's your magical solution to this problem?
Now the only reasons for the moon not appearing to human eyes as an ellipse I can conjure up are, 1. Some sort of refraction or reflection through a lens of some kind. Some sort of lens that always reflects the moon to the facing observer. Some sort of transparent and dense medium.
What? When was the last time you saw a reflection that allowed two people at different locations to see the same thing? If you are correct, the light would bend in all sorts of weird ways just to allow the moon to look like it was sinking.
Let us note that a layer of density does exist at around 100 kilometers up.
The fuck are you talking about? Air becomes less dense with altitude. What makes you think that it will become more dense at 100 kilometers? You're just saying this to try to create a medium that may have the properties you need to magically bend light, all so that you can say the moon is flat. This is a perfect example of starting at your conclusion and then trying to fit evidence to it. Except that this is worse. You're not even trying to fit evidence to your conclusion. You're just making claims and pretending that they are evidence. Unfounded claims are not evidence. The rest of this video is nothing more than more unfounded claims. What World History Official has done is that they have decided that the moon is flat, and then they try to go out and look for evidence of such a thing. The problem is that there is no evidence that the moon is flat. So instead they have to ignore the evidence that the moon is round, like the shadows and the craters on the moon, and instead have to come up with these crazy ideas like a wild medium that somehow bends light, that spheres somehow have no reflection, and yet that spheres also reflect light at a point. This is the kind of thinking that you get when you start at your conclusion, a conclusion that's absolutely insane, and then you have to try to find something, anything at all, to try to make that conclusion work. And as you can tell, you need to start believing some really crazy shit just so that you can think that the moon is flat.